Welcome to my Channel Deep Sleep Mission-DSM. As we begin, I would be delighted if you could share your location in the comments below. It's truly inspiring to witness how far this content travels and to connect with viewers from across the world. The receipt was still warm when I pulled it from the printer. November 3rd, 2024. 11:47 p.m. That's what it said at the top. But I'd been standing in my apartment in Portland, Oregon, just seconds ago. Now I was here, in a blockbuster video that shouldn't exist. The fluorescent lights hummed that specific frequency you only heard in the 90s. You know the one, that barely there buzz that made your teeth ache if you paid too much attention to it. The smell hit me next. Plastic cases, carpet cleaner, that weird popcorn butter they used to pump through the vents even though they never actually sold popcorn. I looked down at the receipt again, my hands were shaking. Late fee due, $47,192.50. Days overdue, 8,743. Title, The Ring, 2002. But here's the thing that made my blood turn to ice water. I'd never rented the Ring. Never even had a Blockbuster card. Before you click away thinking this is just another nostalgia trip gone wrong, let me tell you what happened next. Because if you've ever gotten a call from a number that doesn't exist, if you've ever found a VHS tape in your streaming-era apartment, if you've ever woken up at 3:33 a.m. to the sound of tracking static from a TV you don't own, then you need to hear this. And if you haven't, well, after tonight you might. Comment below if you remember the last movie you ever rented. I dare you to check if you returned it. The story begins now. 3 days earlier, I was just Marcus Chen, 32, software developer, living my unremarkable life in a converted loft in southeast Portland. The kind of guy who meal prepped on Sundays and had a favorite coffee shop where the barista knew my order. Normal. Boring, even. The package arrived on Halloween night. I almost didn't answer the door. Kids had been ringing the bell all evening, and I'd run out of candy 2 hours ago. But this knock was different. 3 slow, deliberate raps. Not the excited hammering of trick-or-treaters. The delivery guy wore a uniform I didn't recognize. Navy blue with yellow trim, no company logo, just a name tag that said Randy in that distinctive Blockbuster font I hadn't seen in over a decade. Marcus Chen? His voice sounded like he'd been gargling gravel. Yeah? Sign here. He held out one of those old carbon copy forms. The kind where you had to press really hard with the pen to make it go through all 3 sheets. What is this? Return. That's all he said. Return. The package was heavier than it looked. About the size of a shoebox, wrapped in brown paper that felt wrong. Too smooth. Too cold. Like it had been sitting in a freezer. I should have refused it. Should have asked more questions. But Randy was already walking back to his van. An honest-to-God Ford Aerostar with wood paneling on the sides. The kind of van that died out with the video stores. Inside my apartment, I set the package on my kitchen counter and grabbed a beer. The return address made me pause. Blockbuster Video Store, number 2847, 1247, Morrison, St. Portland, or 97205, that address. I knew that address. It was a Whole Foods now. Had been for at least 15 years. I peeled back the brown paper carefully. Inside was a blue and yellow plastic case. A VHS case. But not just any VHS. The cover was blank. Completely white except for a small label stuck to the spine. Handwritten in blue ballpoint pen. Overdue. Final notice. My phone rang. Unknown number with a 503 area code. Hello? Static. But not just static. That specific sound of a VHS tape rewinding. That mechanical whir that started slow, sped up in the middle, then slowed again at the end. Hello? I said again. Please be kind." The voice was barely a whisper. Rewind. The line went dead. I sat there for a long moment, beer forgotten, staring at that VHS case. Every rational part of my brain said to throw it away. Take it to the dumpster. Hell, burn it if I had to. But you know that feeling when you're standing at the edge of a cliff? Your brain screams at you to step back, but some primitive part of you whispers, "Jump." That's what I felt holding that case. I opened it. The tape inside was pristine, like it had just come off the factory line. The label was different from the case, though. This one was printed professional looking. Property of Blockbuster Video Customer Copy. Do not remove late fees. Apply after 11:59 p.m. I didn't own a VCR. Haven't owned one since college. But this is where it gets weird. Weirder, I mean. I blinked, and there was a VCR on my TV stand, not a modern one. A massive silver Panasonic from the mid-90s with about 40 unnecessary buttons on the front. The kind where you had to program the clock every time the power went out, and it always flashed 12 o'clock. If you didn't. It was already plugged in, already connected to my 65-inch Samsung. The clock wasn't flashing. It showed 11:47 p.m., but my phone said 9:15 p.m. I put the tape in. I had to. You understand that, right? Sometimes you don't have a choice. Sometimes the story has already started, and you're just catching up to where you're supposed to be. The VCR made that satisfying chunk sound as it accepted the tape. The TV turned on by itself. Static filled the screen, but not regular static. It moved wrong, swirled, like something was trying to push through from the other side. Then the tracking adjusted itself, and I was watching me, but not current me, 8-year-old me, in my childhood living room in Beaverton. I was sitting too close to the TV, cross-legged on that ugly brown carpet Mom refused to replace, watching something, leaning forward like kids do when they're completely absorbed. The camera angle was impossible. It was filming from inside the TV, looking out at little me. Young Marcus reached forward and pressed his hand against the screen. "I want to return it," he whispered. "Please, I want to return it." The tape ejected itself. My apartment was completely dark. The beer on my counter had gone warm. According to my phone, it was now 11:46 p.m. I'd lost over 2.5 hours. The VCR was gone. But the tape sat on my coffee table, rewound and ready. Next to it was something that hadn't been there before. A laminated Blockbuster membership card with my name on it. The photo was me at 8 years old. The expiration date was tomorrow's date. And written in pen across the bottom, 1 rental remaining. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that rewind sound. That mechanical whir that seemed to come from inside my skull. At 3:33 a.m., and I know it was exactly 3:33 because I'd been staring at my phone. The TV turned on again. No VCR this time. Just my regular Samsung showing what looked like security camera footage. Grainy. Black and white. The timestamp in the corner read NOV2 2024 03:33:33. It was the inside of a video store. Empty. Lights on, but nobody home. Rows and rows of videos stretched back further than should have been possible. The camera slowly panned across the store, and I realized with a cold certainty that this wasn't recorded. This was live. Something moved in the comedy section. The camera didn't zoom. It physically moved, like someone was carrying it. Walking slowly down the main aisle, past action-adventure, past drama, past the little kiddie section with the beanbag chairs that I suddenly remembered even though I'd never been to this particular store. The figure in comedy wasn't hiding. It stood at the end of the aisle facing the camera. Waiting. It was Randy, the delivery driver, but his uniform was different now. Older. The fabric looked stiff, like it had been soaked in something and dried repeatedly. His name tag was the same, but underneath Randy was a new line. Employee since 1987. He held up a VHS case. Even in the grainy footage, I could read the title, The Ring. "You rented this," he said. His voice came through my TV speakers, tinny and distorted. "October 31st, 2000. You were 8. "No," I said to my empty apartment. "No, I didn't." "Cedar Hills Blockbuster, your mother's account. She let you pick one movie for Halloween." He opened the case, empty. "You never returned it." The memory hit me like ice water. Mom rushing me out of the store, me clutching that case. We'd watched it that night. No, that wasn't right. The Ring came out in 2002. I couldn't have rented it in 2000. "Time works different here," Randy said, like he could hear my thoughts. "We have movies that haven't been made yet. Movies that never got made. Movies that shouldn't exist." He gestured to the shelves around him. "We have them all, and they all have late fees." The camera moved on its own, turning to show the new releases wall. Every single case showed the same thing. My face. Different ages. 8, 15, 21. Current me. Older versions I hadn't lived yet. All with the same title, Overdue. "The store closes tomorrow," Randy continued. "Permanently. All accounts must be settled. All items must be returned." "I don't have the movie," I shouted at the TV. "I was 8. It was 24 years ago." "Every rental exists somewhere," Randy said. He pointed to something off camera. "You just have to know where to look." The TV shut off. I sat in the dark, breathing hard. This was insane, impossible. But that membership card sat on my coffee table, catching the streetlight from my window. Real as anything. I picked it up. The back had text I hadn't noticed before. Fine print, terms and conditions. But one line stood out, handwritten in that same blue pen. "Present this card at any location to access your account." Any location. I grabbed my jacket and keys. It was almost 4 a.m., but I had to know. The address from the package. 11247 Morrison. The Whole Foods. The streets were empty. Portland at 4 a.m. on a Sunday feels like a different city. Like everyone else evacuated and forgot to tell you. The Whole Foods loomed dark, its windows reflecting the streetlights like dead eyes. I parked and walked to the entrance. Obviously closed. But where the automatic doors met, there was a gap. Not a normal gap. A vertical line of pure darkness about an inch wide. Like someone had taken a razor to reality itself. I held up the membership card. The gap widened. Just enough for a person to squeeze through. The darkness inside wasn't the absence of light. It was deeper than that. The kind of dark that makes you understand why primitive humans feared the night. But I could hear something in there. That fluorescent hum. That specific frequency. I stepped through. The lights came on in sections, like dominoes. Thunk, thunk, thunk. Revealing exactly what I expected and feared. A perfect blockbuster video. Every detail exactly right. The wire racks with microwave popcorn nobody ever bought. The cardboard standee for a movie I didn't recognize. Something called The Last Customer, starring nobody I'd ever heard of. The drop box by the entrance with its metal mouth hungry for returns. "Welcome back, Marcus." I spun around. A woman stood behind the counter, late 30s, early 40s maybe. Blockbuster polo shirt tucked into khakis, name tag. Sarah, manager, member since forever. "I need to return something," I said. "I know." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. They were flat, glassy, like a doll's eyes. "But first, you need to understand the late fee." She turned the computer monitor toward me. It was one of those ancient CRT monitors, The screen curved and flickering slightly. The text was green on black, like something from the first Matrix movie. Account: Chen Marcus joined. 10/31/2000. Current rentals. One title: The Ring, 2002. Due date: 11/07/2000. Days overdue: 8,743. Late fee: 47,892.50. That's impossible, I said. The dates don't make sense. Time works different here, Sarah said, echoing Randy. We exist in the spaces between, the closed stores, the forgotten accounts, the unreturned memories. Memories? She gestured to the store around us. Every movie is a memory, Marcus. Every rental is a piece of time you borrowed. Some people return them, some don't, and some... She leaned forward. Some can't, because they borrowed something that wasn't meant to be taken. Sarah led me deeper into the store, past the new releases, past the regular sections, to a door marked Employees Only, that I somehow knew had always been there and had never been there until this moment. You want to know why you specifically got the notice, she said. It wasn't a question. The door opened to a hallway that couldn't exist. The Whole Foods wasn't this big, the building wasn't this big, but here we were walking down a corridor lined with more doors. Each one had a small placard. Returns 1987-1990. Damaged goods. Never rented. Should have been destroyed. We stopped at one labeled Permanent Collection. Every blockbuster had one, Sarah said, her hand on the doorknob. Movies that weren't really movies. They looked like movies. Had covers, barcodes, everything. But they were doors, windows, connections to the spaces between spaces. She opened the door. The room beyond was impossible. Infinite rows of shelves stretching up and up and up, disappearing into darkness. Each shelf held hundreds of VHS tapes, all in those blue and yellow cases. But these weren't movies I recognized. The titles were wrong. The Day That Never Ended. Sarah's Last Shift. The Customer Who Stayed. Your movie, she said. The Ring. It wasn't supposed to be in the regular inventory. It was supposed to be here. Safe. Contained. But sometimes... She pulled a tape from a nearby shelf. The case showed a family of 4, all with their faces blurred out. Sometimes they escape, find their way to the wrong shelves, get rented by the wrong people. I was 8, I said. I didn't know. No, but your mother did. Sarah's expression changed. Something like sympathy crossed her face. She worked here, Marcus, 1907 to 91. She knew about the permanent collection, knew what these movies really were. The memory hit me again, clearer this time. Mom in a blockbuster uniform I'd forgotten she'd ever worn. Mom with access to sections regular employees couldn't enter. Mom who quit suddenly one day and never said why. She tried to protect you, Sarah continued. Took that tape home to destroy it. But you found it first. Watched it while she was at her new job, and once you watch something from the permanent collection... What? I asked, though I already knew. You become part of it. The movie keeps a piece of you, and you keep a piece of the movie. That's the real late fee, Marcus, not money. Time, memory, pieces of yourself you don't even know are missing. She led me to a specific shelf. My name was on a small label. Below it, dozens of tapes, all with the same title. Marcus Chen, age 8 to 32. Every day since you watched it, Sarah explained. The movie has been recording you, storing you, building its collection. And tomorrow, when the last blockbuster closes for real, all those pieces become permanent inventory. What does that mean? Sarah pulled one of the tapes from my shelf. The case showed me at 15, standing in front of my high school. But I wasn't alone. There was something behind me, slightly out of focus, a shadow that didn't match my position. It means you stay here, in the spaces between, neither returned nor rented, just archived. I thought about running, but where would I go? We were in a Blockbuster that existed in a Whole Foods that was closed. Reality had already broken. The normal rules didn't apply. There has to be a way out, I said. There is. Sarah walked to another section. This one was different. The tapes here were in red cases instead of blue. The return policy. But it's not what you think. She handed me a red case. The cover was blank except for 2 words. Final notice. You can't return the movie you rented, she said, because that movie doesn't exist anymore. It's become part of you, woven into your timeline, but you can return something else. What? The years between. The time you borrowed without knowing. Every day since October 31st, 2000. She opened the case. Inside was a tape, but the tape was transparent. I could see through it, and in the clear plastic, images moved. My life, college, first job, first apartment, friends, relationships, everything that happened after that Halloween night. If I return this, you go back, 8 years old again. November 1st, 2000, the day after Halloween. But this time, the movie was never rented. Your mother never worked here. The permanent collection never touched your life. I'd lose 24 years. You'd trade them, the late fee for time, the time for freedom. Sarah's doll eyes reflected the fluorescent lights. But you have to decide before the store closes. Tomorrow, 11:59 p.m. A phone rang somewhere in the store. That old electronic trill that no phone makes anymore. Sarah's expression changed. You need to go. Now. Why? What's... The lights started shutting off. Section by section. Thunk. 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 But in reverse now, darkness racing toward us. Other customers are coming, Sarah whispered. The ones who never left. The ones who've been browsing for decades. Run, Marcus. Take the tape and run. I grabbed the transparent VHS and ran. Through the door, down the impossible hallway, past sections that hadn't been there before. Customers who stayed too long. Employees who never clocked out. The final rental. Behind me, I could hear them. Footsteps that weren't quite right. Too many feet, or not enough. And voices, discussing movies that never existed in words that weren't quite English. The main store was dark except for the emergency exits signs, casting everything in that hellish red glow. But the entrance, the gap in reality, it was getting smaller. I squeezed through just as it sealed completely. The Whole Foods parking lot. 5:47 a.m. The sky just starting to lighten in the east. My car sat alone under a streetlight, covered in dew like it had been there all night. In my hand, the transparent tape. Still impossible. Still showing my life playing out in fast-forward through the clear plastic. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You have 18 hours to decide. Present your membership card at any location to complete your return. Thank you for choosing Blockbuster. I spent the day trying to live normally. Went to my coffee shop, ordered my usual. But the barista didn't recognize me. Said I looked familiar but couldn't place from where. You remind me of someone, she said, squinting. A kid who used to come in here with his mom. Years ago. But that doesn't make sense. It was already starting, the unraveling. The store pulling at the threads of my existence. By noon, 3 of my coworkers had forgotten my name. By 3 p.m., my apartment building's doorman asked to see ID. By 5, my best friend since college texted asking if we'd met before. I was being erased from the outside in, or maybe from the inside out. Hard to tell when reality itself was having a dispute with a video store that shouldn't exist. I sat in my apartment, watching the transparent tape play my life in the dying light. There was so much I'd forgotten. Good moments, bad ones. That time I got food poisoning in Vegas and thought I was dying. The night I met Jennifer and fumbled my words so badly she laughed for 5 minutes straight. My first coding job where I deleted the entire database on day 3. 24 years of mistakes and miracles, all for the low price of $47,819.50 in late fees. My phone rang. Mom. Marcus? Her voice was strange, uncertain. I had the strangest dream about you. You were 8 years old, and we were in a video store, and I was trying to tell you something important, but I couldn't remember what. Mom, I said, do you remember working at Blockbuster? Silence long enough that I checked to see if the call had dropped. How do you know about that? She whispered. I found something out about a movie I rented when I was 8. No. The word came out sharp, frightened. No, you didn't rent anything. I made sure. I kept you away from that section. I burned my employee ID. I never let you have a membership card. Mom, I did rent something. Halloween 2000. The Ring. She made a sound I'd never heard from her before. Part sob, part laugh, part something else. That's not possible, she said. The Ring didn't exist in 2000. I know because I tried to prevent it. That movie, it was in the permanent collection. A movie about a tape that kills you in 7 days, but it wasn't supposed to be made until 2002. It was a temporal paradox, a film that inspired its own existence. You knew what those movies were. I found out too late, after I'd already been there 2 years. The manager before Sarah, he told me the truth, about the spaces between, about what Blockbuster really was, not just a video store, a repository, a place where abandoned timelines and forgotten futures were stored. Why didn't you quit immediately? Another long pause. Because, once you know, you can't unknow. And they needed employees who understood, to keep things contained, to make sure the wrong movies didn't get into the wrong hands. But then I got pregnant with you, and I realized I couldn't risk it. Couldn't risk you getting exposed to that place. But I did get exposed. I know, she said. I've known for 24 years. That's why I've been paying. What? The late fees, Marcus. Who do you think has been keeping them at bay? Every month I go to a place that doesn't exist and pay what I can. Not money, memories. Little pieces of myself. The day you were born, your first word, your college graduation. I give them up, and they give you more time. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. But I'm running out of memories to trade, she continued. And now they want the principal, not just the interest. I looked at the transparent tape in my hand, thought about what Sarah had offered. Return the years, go back, start over. Mom, I said, what if I could fix this? You can't. Once you've watched something from the permanent collection, I could return the time. Go back to being 8, the day after Halloween. No. The word was fierce. No, Marcus, those 24 years. That's your life, your real life. Every moment, every choice, every mistake and triumph. You don't trade that away. Then what do I do? She was quiet for a moment, then, you become the last customer. What? Every store needs a final transaction. Someone to turn off the lights, lock the doors, end the story. If you become the last customer, if you're there when it finally closes, you can set the terms. How do you know? Because I've been researching for 24 years. Reading every terms of service, every employee handbook, every corporate memo that leaked from the spaces between. There's always a final customer, and they always get to make one last deal. I looked at my phone. 8:47 p.m. 3 hours and 12 minutes until the deadline. "Where are you?" I asked. "Outside your building. I've been here since you called. I didn't know if I'd still remember you by the time I got to your door." I ran downstairs. She was there, sitting in her old Honda, looking exactly the same except for her eyes. They were older, tired, like someone who'd been paying interest on a debt for decades. "Show me your membership card," she said. I handed it to her. She studied it under the dome light, running her fingers over the lamination. "This is real," she said. "This makes you a legitimate customer, with all the rights and privileges that entails." She handed it back, including the right to one final rental. "I don't understand. The store closes at 11:59, but customers inside can stay until they've finished browsing. It's in the corporate policy, page 247, subsection 18C. No customer shall be forced to leave before completing their transaction. So I go in but don't leave. You go in and you rent one last movie, something from the permanent collection, something that matters." She reached into her purse and pulled out a VHS case I hadn't seen in over 2 decades. This one. The cover showed our family. Me, her, and Dad before the divorce. Standing in front of a Blockbuster, all smiling. The title read, "The Life We Were Supposed to Have." "This doesn't exist," I said. "It does in there. Every possible timeline, every choice unmade, every path not taken, they're all in the permanent collection." She pressed the case into my hands. "Rent this one, watch it. And when it ends, when it asks if you want to rewind, say no. What happens if I don't rewind? The movie stays at its ending, and so do you. Outside the loop, free from the collection." She touched my face. "It's the only way to pay a debt to a place that exists outside of time. You give it an ending it can keep." My phone buzzed. 11 p.m., 1 hour. "Go," she said. "I'll be here when you get back. If you get back, if there's a here to get back to." I drove to the Whole Foods. The Gap was already there, wider this time. Wide enough to walk through without squeezing, like it was expecting me. Inside, the Blockbuster was fully lit but empty. No Sarah, no Randy, no other customers browsing the aisles. Just me and thousands of movies that shouldn't exist. I walked to the permanent collection door. It was already open. The infinite shelves stretched upward. But now I could see the top, could see where they ended. Because the store was ending. Reality was sealing the edges, closing the spaces between. I found it quickly. The life we were supposed to have. Right where Mom said it would be. Between the day Marcus wasn't born and the timeline where we stayed. The front counter was abandoned, but the register was on. Waiting. I scanned my membership card, then the movie. The computer made that satisfied beep of a successful transaction. Rental period. Until the end, late fees. Not applicable. Thank you for choosing Blockbuster. A VCR had appeared on the counter, already connected to a small TV that definitely hadn't been there before. I inserted the tape. Static. Then, life, but different. Dad never left, Mom never worked at Blockbuster. I never rented the ring. We were normal, happy, boring in all the right ways. I watched myself grow up different. More confident, less haunted. Went to different schools, made different friends, became someone else entirely. The tape ran for what felt like hours, but the clock never moved. 11:47 p.m. the entire time. Until, finally, it showed all three of us, current day, having dinner. Laughing about something I couldn't quite hear. Dad's hair gray now. Mom's eyes without that tired weight. Me without the shadow that had followed me for 24 years. The screen went blue, the universal signal for end of tape. Text appeared. Please be kind. Rewind? I reached for the VCR. My finger hovered over the rewind button. No, I said. The lights went out, all at once, thunk, but I could still see the TV. The blue screen. The text changed. Thank you for visiting Blockbuster. The last customer receives 1 courtesy. I want the late fees forgiven, I said to the darkness. All of them, for everyone. Every person who never returned a tape. Every customer who owes something to the spaces between. Clear the accounts. The TV flickered. New text. That's not how business works. You're not a business anymore, I said. You're a memory, and memories should be free. Silence. Darkness. Then, impossibly, laughter. Sarah's voice from everywhere and nowhere. Corporate approved your request. All accounts cleared. All debts forgiven. All tapes returned. The TV turned off. The VCR disappeared. And I was standing in a Whole Foods at 11:59 p.m., holding nothing but a membership card to a store that no longer existed. I walked out through the automatic doors that opened normally, got in my car, drove home. Mom was still there, but her eyes were different, younger, like someone who'd just remembered 24 years of memories she'd traded away. Is it done? She asked. I handed her the membership card. It was blank now, just gray plastic, nothing on it at all. It's done. We sat there in the car for a while, not talking, just existing in a world where Blockbuster was finally, truly closed. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. But this time it wasn't threatening. Just 2 words. Be kind. I deleted it, blocked the number, and went upstairs to my apartment that everyone suddenly remembered I lived in. The transparent tape was gone, the red case too, but on my coffee table was something new, a photo I'd never seen before. Me, Mom, and Dad at a Blockbuster in '99. All of us smiling. All of us together. All of us unaware of the spaces between. I flipped it over. On the back, in handwriting I didn't recognize, the only late fee that matters is the time you don't spend with the people you love. Sarah, manager, store number 2847. I put the photo on my fridge. Called Mom to say goodnight. Then called Dad for the first time in 3 years. We talked until dawn. But here's the thing. And this is why I'm telling you this story. Why I need you to listen carefully and maybe check your own junk drawer or that box in your closet you haven't opened since your last move. This morning, I found something. A membership card, not Blockbuster. Different. Red and white instead of blue and yellow. The logo is familiar but wrong, like looking at a friend's face in a dream. Hollywood Video, it says across the top. My name printed below. The expiration date is tomorrow, and written in pen across the bottom, in handwriting I now recognize as Sarah's. Every ending is just another beginning. Some stores never really close, they just change management. So I'm asking you, begging you really, check your old things. Look for membership cards to places that shouldn't exist anymore. Because if you find one, if you have any late fees, if you've ever rented something and aren't absolutely certain you returned it, pay attention to the calls from unknown numbers. Watch for vans that shouldn't exist. And whatever you do, be kind. Rewind. Sweet dreams. And don't forget to subscribe. You never know when the next notice might arrive, or what store it might be from. The spaces between are full of things we've borrowed and forgotten to return. Check the comments. Tell me what you found. We might not be alone in this. The late fees are adding up. And somewhere, in a store that doesn't exist, Sarah is pulling the next tape from the permanent collection. This time, it has your name on it. Story number 2. They found Marcus's camera 3 weeks after he disappeared. The memory card was still intact. Corrupted in places, but intact What we saw in that footage changed everything we thought we knew about urban exploring in Detroit. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you what really happens when you break the rules. The unspoken rules that every Detroit explorer knows, or should know. Before I continue, hit that subscribe button if you want to hear more stories like this. Stories that'll make you question every abandoned building you've ever walked past. And stick around till the end, because what happened to Marcus, well, it's still happening. Story begins now. My name is Jake. I've been exploring abandoned buildings in Detroit for 6 years now. Started when I was 22, fresh out of Michigan State. Couldn't find a job that paid enough to move out of my parents' basement in Ferndale. So I started a YouTube channel. Urban exploration was trending, and Detroit was a goldmine of forgotten places. The Packard plant, Michigan Central Station, the old Fisher Body plant. I'd hit them all. Built up a decent following too, about 40,000 subscribers. Nothing huge, but enough to make some side money. Enough to justify spending my weekends crawling through broken windows and dodging security. That Tuesday in October started like any other. I was editing footage from the weekend, a solo exploration of an old elementary school on the east side. My phone buzzed. Instagram DM from someone called Detroit Rules Keeper. You've been chosen for something special. Exclusive access to the Branson Hotel tomorrow night, 11 p.m. Bring 2 others who understand the rules. The Branson Hotel. Every Detroit explorer knew about it, but nobody talked about it. Not really. It had been sealed since 1987, not just boarded up, but actually sealed. Concrete blocks, welded steel plates, the works. The city spent more keeping people out of that building than they did on half the schools still operating. I screenshot the message and sent it to my group chat. Within minutes, Marcus and Lily responded. Marcus was a photographer, been exploring longer than any of us. Lily was newer, maybe 6 months in, but she had good instincts. She knew when something felt wrong. This is sketchy as hell, Lily texted. It's the Branson, Marcus replied. When are we going to get another chance? He was right. The Branson was legendary. Built in 1924, closed after a fire in 1987 that killed 17 people. The official report blamed faulty wiring, but the survivors, the few who would talk, they told different stories. Stories about things moving in the walls, voices in empty rooms. One woman swore she saw her daughter, who'd died 3 years earlier, standing at the end of a hallway, beckoning her deeper into the smoke. We met at a Coney Island on Woodward Avenue the next evening. Marcus brought his new camera, some expensive DSLR he'd been bragging about for weeks. Lily had her backpack full of the usual: flashlights, batteries, first aid kit, protein bars. I had my GoPro strapped to my chest and my phone ready for backup footage. So, what do we know about Detroit Rules Keeper? Lily asked, picking at her fries. Nothing, I admitted. Profile was created yesterday, no posts, no other followers. Probably just some urban explorer with connections. Marcus said, maybe someone who works for the city, has access to keys or something. We drove separately to the location. The message had included GPS coordinates, not an address. They led us to an alley off Grand River Avenue, about 3 blocks from where the Branson should have been. But when we turned the corner, the hotel was there. But it wasn't where it should have been. I knew these streets. I'd driven them hundreds of times. The Branson was supposed to be on the other side of the highway, near the old train station. But here it stood. All 14 stories of it, looking exactly like the old photographs. Red brick darkened with decades of Detroit weather. Windows black as pitch. and the entrance. The main entrance that should have been sealed with concrete. It was just boarded up, fresh plywood, like it had been put up yesterday. "This isn't right," Lily whispered. "The coordinates have to be wrong," Marcus said, but he was already getting his camera out. "Maybe they moved it for the message, to throw people off." I wanted to agree with him, wanted to believe there was a logical explanation. But standing there, looking up at those dark windows, I felt something I'd never felt before in 6 years of exploring. I felt like the building was looking back. The plywood over the entrance had been cut, a neat rectangle, just big enough for a person to squeeze through. Fresh sawdust on the ground. Someone had been here recently. Very recently. Marcus went first, then me, then Lily. The moment we crossed the threshold, our flashlights dimmed. Not dead, just dimmer. Like the darkness inside was thicker somehow, heavier. The lobby was perfect. That's the only word for it. Perfect, not restored, not renovated. Perfect, like it had never aged. The marble floor gleamed. The chandelier, all 1,000 crystals of it, hung pristine from the painted ceiling. Even the air smelled wrong. Not musty or moldy like every other abandoned building. It smelled like furniture polish and fresh flowers. "Guys," Lily's voice was barely a whisper. "Look at the dust." There was dust on everything, a thick layer of it. But our footprints weren't leaving marks. The dust moved around our feet like water, flowing back to cover where we'd stepped. That's when we saw the sign. Brass plaque on the wall next to the old elevators. It hadn't been there in any of the historical photos. I would have remembered. The Detroit Ruins. Rules 1. Never explore alone after midnight. 2. Always leave the way you came. 3. Don't touch the photographs. If you hear your name, don't answer. 5. The 5th floor doesn't exist. 6. Trust your shadow. 7. Break the rules. Join the ruins. "This is someone's art project," Marcus said, but he was filming everything. "Has to be some elaborate installation." "In an abandoned hotel that shouldn't be here?" Lily asked. "Buildings don't move." Lily. But even as he said it, we all knew something was deeply wrong. The elevator doors were brass, polished to a mirror shine. In the reflection, the lobby behind us was different, ruined, burned, exactly how it should have looked after 37 years. We took the stairs. The carpet was burgundy with gold patterns, thick enough that our footsteps made no sound. On each landing, there were photographs, black and white portraits in gilded frames, all of them showing the same thing, the hotel, but from angles that didn't make sense. Views from inside the walls, from under the floors, from above the ceilings, looking down through invisible gaps at people in old-fashioned clothes, walking through hallways, sitting in rooms, completely unaware they were being watched. "Don't touch the photographs," Lily reminded us. 2nd floor was hotel rooms, doors all closed but not locked. We opened 3. Each room was perfectly preserved but wrong. In one, a tea service was set for 4, steam still rising from the cups. In another, a radio played static that almost sounded like voices. In the 3rd, the bed was made, but the shape under the covers, it was too long and too still. 3rd floor, more rooms. One door was open, inside. Someone had written on the walls. Not graffiti, names, hundreds of names in neat handwriting, all dated. Sarah Chen, October 3rd, 1907. Michael Torres, November 15th, 1991. Jennifer Brown, March 22nd, 98. The dates went on. 2005, 2010, 2015, the last one. David Kim, October 10th, 2024. That was 2 weeks ago. We should go, Lily said. Now. Just a bit more. Marcus was in full photographer mode. This is incredible footage. 4th floor. The hallway was longer than it should have been. I'd studied the blueprints of this place. The building was only so wide, but this hallway stretched on and on. Doors every 10 feet on both sides. We walked for 5 minutes and hadn't reached the end. Stop. I grabbed Marcus's arm. Look back. The stairway we'd come from was gone. Just more hallway, stretching in both directions, endless doors, endless burgundy carpet. We went straight, Marcus said. The stairs have to be. That's when we heard it. Footsteps, above us. Heavy, deliberate footsteps. But we were on the 4th floor, and rule number 5, the 5th floor doesn't exist, Lily whispered. The footsteps stopped directly overhead. Then a voice, my voice, but I wasn't speaking. Jake, it called from above. Jake, come up, everyone's waiting. Marcus was the first to notice his shadow. It wasn't following him properly. When he moved left, it hesitated like it was thinking. When he raised his arm, the shadow's arm moved a second too late. Trust your shadow, Lily quoted. What does that even mean? The voice above, my voice, but not my voice, kept calling. Not just my name now. It knew things, private things. Jake, remember when you broke into the Silver Dome? Remember what you found in the owner's box? You never told anyone about that. It was right. I'd never told anyone about the photograph I'd found. A picture of the Silver Dome, taken from above, from an impossible angle, showing the roof transparent, showing me inside, finding the photograph of myself, finding the photograph. How does it know that? Marcus asked. We need to find stairs. I said, any stairs? Down? But every door we opened now led to the same thing. A staircase going up, only up. All of them led to a landing with a brass number 5. The 5th floor doesn't exist, Lily kept saying. It doesn't exist, so we can't go there. Then where do the stairs go? Marcus asked. His shadow suddenly jerked, pulled away from him completely, and ran down the hallway. Marcus screamed, not from pain, but from something worse. The moment his shadow left, he started fading, not disappearing, but becoming less real, less there. Marcus! Lily grabbed his arm, but her hand went partially through him. Follow it, I shouted. Trust your shadow. Follow it. We ran, Marcus stumbling, becoming more translucent with each step. His shadow was moving with purpose now, leading us through a door we'd already checked. But this time, instead of stairs going up, it was a room, a massive ballroom that couldn't possibly fit in the building's footprint. The room was full of people, all of them translucent like Marcus was becoming, all of them missing their shadows. They were dancing, or trying to, moving to music we couldn't hear, their faces blank, their eyes unfocused. Marcus's shadow stood in the center of the room, waiting. Go to it, I told him. Quick. He stumbled forward, and the moment he reached his shadow, it reattached. Color flooded back into him, solidity. He gasped like he'd been drowning. We're leaving, Lily said. Now, we find the exit and the translucent dancers all stopped, turned toward us. One of them stepped forward. David Kim, according to his name tag, October 10th, 2024. You can't leave, he said, his voice like wind through empty rooms. Not until you go to the 5th floor. Everyone has to go to the 5th floor. It doesn't exist, Lily said firmly. David smiled, a horrible, empty smile. Exactly. The lights went out. Complete darkness. Even our flashlights died, in the black. I heard Marcus scream, heard Lily calling my name, and then nothing. I woke up on the 5th floor. I knew it was the 5th floor because the brass number on the wall said so. But Lily was right. It didn't exist. Not in any way that made sense. The floor was wrong, sometimes carpet, sometimes marble, sometimes dirt. The walls shifted between wallpaper, bare brick, and occasionally, nothing at all. Just views into other rooms, other floors, other times. Marcus was there, sitting against a wall that kept cycling between different decades of decay. His camera was still recording. "Where's Lily?" I asked. He pointed down the hall. She was standing at a window, looking out. But when I reached her, I saw what she was looking at. We weren't looking out. We were looking into another room, where 3 people were exploring. 3 people who looked exactly like us, making the same choices, having the same conversations. "How long have we been here?" she asked. I checked my phone. Dead. Marcus's camera display showed an error where the timestamp should be. "Time doesn't work here," a voice said behind us. We turned. An old man in a maintenance uniform. Name tag said Reynolds. He looked normal except for his eyes. They reflected too much, like there were rooms behind them. "You broke the rules," he said simply. "Came after midnight, touched the photographs, answered when it called your name, and now you're here, the 5th floor that doesn't exist. Where all rule breakers go. We didn't touch any photographs," I protested. Reynolds laughed, pointed at Marcus's camera. "You've been taking photographs the whole time. Every picture you take in the ruins becomes part of the ruins. Didn't anyone ever tell you that?" Reynolds led us through the 5th floor, through rooms that were sometimes burned, sometimes pristine, sometimes full of people from different eras all existing at once. A 1920s flapper passed through Marcus like he was the ghost. A child from the 1950s played jacks in a corner, the ball bouncing up but never coming down. The Branson Hotel, Reynolds explained, was built on a threshold. The architects knew. They designed it to be a door. But doors work both ways. He showed us a room full of filing cabinets. Each drawer contained rules. Different rules for different years. 1924 to 1940. Don't whistle in the hallways. Stay out of room 1408. Never take the elevator during a thunderstorm. 1940 to 1960. The basement is off limits. If you see wet footprints, follow them backwards. The woman in the red dress doesn't exist. 1960 to 1987. Don't look in the mirrors after 3 a.m. The 7th floor is safe, but the 9th floor isn't. If the walls bleed, it's Tuesday. After the fire, after they sealed it, the rules changed, became simpler, more desperate. Because the hotel was hungry, sealed up, it couldn't feed the proper way. So it started calling to people like you, urban explorers, thrill seekers, people who would break the rules. "Feed?" Lily asked. Reynolds gestured to the translucent dancers we'd seen. "Every person who breaks the rules becomes part of the hotel, not dead, not alive, just here forever. The hotel feeds on their existence, their possibility, their stories. But you're not translucent," I pointed out. "I never broke the rules." Reynolds smiled sadly. "I wrote them. I was the night manager in 1987. I knew what this place was. Tried to keep people safe when the fire started. It wasn't faulty wiring. The hotel was angry. 17 people died because they didn't follow the rules. And I stayed. Someone has to maintain the rules, update them, send them out. You're Detroit Rules Keeper," Marcus said. Reynolds nodded. Every few weeks, I send out invitations. The hotel needs fresh stories, fresh possibilities. And there are always those who can't resist, who think the rules don't apply to them. So we're trapped here. Lily's voice was surprisingly calm. Not trapped. Reynolds walked to a window. A real window this time, showing the actual Detroit skyline. There's always a way out, but it requires understanding the real rule, the one that matters. He turned to us. The rules aren't meant to keep you safe. They're meant to be broken. The hotel doesn't want obedient guests. It wants rule breakers. But there's one rule that actually matters. One that's never written down. What rule? I asked. The hotel can only keep you if you believe you're really here. I thought about that. Looked at Marcus. Still filming. At Lily. Taking notes even now. At myself. Standing in an impossible place. We never entered the hotel, I said slowly. It was in the wrong place. Buildings don't move. The 5th floor flickered. We're not here, Lily added. Catching on, we can't be on a floor that doesn't exist. The walls began to shift, showing other times, other places. This is just another abandoned building in Detroit, Marcus said. Lowering his camera, just another empty place, nothing special. Reynolds smiled, a genuine smile this time. Now you understand. The hotel has power because people give it power. They believe in the mystery, the danger, the romance of urban decay, but strip that away, and it's just empty rooms and broken promises. The 5th floor shuddered, cracked, and suddenly we were in a different place, the real Branson Hotel. Burned, ruined, exactly as it should be. We were on the 4th floor, the actual 4th floor. Our flashlights worked. Our phones had signal. Reynolds was gone, but on the wall. Someone had spray-painted a message. Fresh paint, still wet. Thanks for playing. Come back soon. DRK. We left immediately. Didn't stop. Didn't look back. Didn't film anything else. Found the exit exactly where it should have been. Our cars were parked outside, covered in dust like they'd been there for hours. Marcus's camera. When we reviewed the footage, it showed 3 hours of static, nothing else. My GoPro was the same. Lily's notes were blank pages. But I remember, we all remember. Marcus stopped urban exploring after that night. Deleted his Instagram, sold his camera. Lily still explores, but never in Detroit. Never anywhere with rules. But it wasn't that simple. Nothing ever is when you've been somewhere that doesn't exist. Marcus called me 3 days later, his voice shaking. Jake, I think I'm still there. I wake up and for a moment, I don't know which room I'm in, my apartment or one of those hotel rooms, and my shadow, it's always a half second behind now, always. Lily started having dreams. Dreams where she was writing names on walls, names of people who hadn't disappeared yet, people who were still living their normal lives, unaware that their names were already carved into the walls of a building that didn't exist. I dreamed about a woman named Patricia Gonzalez. She told me over coffee 2 weeks later. October 30th, 2024. That's next week. Jake, what if it's not over? What if we brought something back with us? I tried to tell her it was just trauma, post-exploration anxiety. All urban explorers get it sometimes. That sense that the buildings are following you home. But then I started noticing things. My editing software would sometimes show footage I hadn't taken, glimpses of hallways I'd never walked down, rooms I'd never entered, always deleted by the time I tried to look closer. But I'd see them, just for a frame or two, and the comments on my videos. Some of them were from accounts that had been created in the future, comments dated days or weeks ahead, all saying the same thing. The rules are spreading. I researched Patricia Gonzalez, found her Facebook, her Instagram, her LinkedIn. Normal woman. Worked in accounting. Lived in a suburb of Chicago. Never posted anything about urban exploration. Never expressed interest in abandoned buildings. But on October 30th, her social media went silent. I called the Chicago PD, reported her missing. They told me she'd been reported missing by her family that same day. Last seen leaving work, heading home. Never arrived. 3 days later, they found her car, parked outside the ruins of the Biograph Theater, a building that had been demolished in 2019, except according to the police report. The building was there, fully intact, like it had never been torn down. That's when I knew. The Detroit ruins rules weren't just about Detroit. They were spreading, moving from city to city, building to building, finding new places to take root. I started getting messages, DMs from accounts I didn't recognize. All variations of Rules Keeper, Chicago Rules Keeper, Boston Rules Keeper, Seattle Rules Keeper. Each message contained coordinates and rules. Different rules for different cities. The Chicago Ruins Rules. 1. Never explore during a blizzard. 2. The third floor is always Tuesday. 3. If you hear jazz music, run toward it. Never away. 4. Red doors lead home. Blue doors lead deeper. 5. The ghost of Mrs. O'Leary's cow guards the basement. Don't trust mirrors in October 7. Break the rules. Feed the city. The Boston Rules. 1. Tea leaves in the walls spell warnings. 2. Revolutionary ghosts only speak in riddles. The harbor calls but never answers. 4. Count the bells. If there are 13, leave 5. Freedom Trail leads everywhere except freedom. 6. Paul Revere rides at 3 a.m. sharp. Break the rules. Join the revolution. Each set was different, but rule number 7 was always the same. Always that invitation, that dare. I realized Reynolds had lied, or maybe he'd only told us part of the truth. The hotel wasn't feeding on rule breakers. It was creating them, using them as seeds to spread to other cities, other buildings. Every urban explorer who'd entered the Branson and made it out. We weren't survivors. We were carriers. Marcus called me again last week. Said he'd been walking through downtown Detroit and suddenly found himself in Chicago, standing in front of the rebuilt Biograph Theater, with no memory of traveling there, no memory of getting on a plane or in a car, just there. The building was open. He told me. Fresh plywood over the entrance, cut in a perfect rectangle, and I could hear jazz music coming from inside. Real music, not static. And Jake, I wanted to go in. I wanted to break the rules. But you didn't, I said, silence on the line for a long moment. Then Marcus laughed, a sound I'd never heard from him before. Empty, like wind through broken windows. Who says I didn't? The line went dead. I tried calling back. Number disconnected. I haven't heard from Marcus since, but sometimes, when I'm editing videos late at night, I see his shadow in the reflection of my monitor, standing behind me, pointing at the screen, at footage of buildings I've never visited, in cities I've never been to. Part 6. The Network. The rules are evolving, spreading faster now. I track the missing persons reports, urban explorers, photographers, YouTubers, all disappearing near abandoned buildings that shouldn't exist, or buildings that exist when they shouldn't. Los Angeles, the Ambassador Hotel, demolished in 2006, but explorers are posting videos from inside it, fresh videos, dated this year. The hotel lobby pristine, the ballroom where Bobby Kennedy was shot, somehow untouched by time. The Los Angeles Rules one, stars on the floor point to exits. 2. Room 928 is always occupied. Don't photograph the ballroom. If the earthquake sirens sound, it's already too late. 5. The ambassador never checks out. 6. Dreams are just unfilmed movies. Break the rules. Join the show. New York. The original Penn Station. Torn down in 1963. But there are Instagram posts, fresh posts, from inside the waiting room, the concourse, the cathedral-like ceilings that were lost to progress decades ago. The New York rules. 1. All trains arrive on track. 13. 2. The information board lies on purpose. 3. Grand Central is the decoy. If you hear Sinatra, you're in the wrong decade. 5. The city that never sleeps has nightmares. Every platform leads to somewhere else. 7. Break the rules. Become the underground. I've stopped making regular urban exploration videos. Now I document the rules, track the pattern, try to warn people. But who's going to believe a story about buildings that move? About abandoned places that abandon reality? My subscriber count has dropped to 12,000. The algorithm doesn't like content that questions the nature of existence. But the people who stay, the people who keep watching, they understand. They see their shadows hesitating too. Lily disappeared last month. I got one text from her, just coordinates and a timestamp. The coordinates led to the ruins of Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia, a place that's been a tourist attraction for years. But when I looked it up, according to city records, it had been demolished in 2021, except it wasn't demolished, it was there, offering guided tours, selling merchandise, acting like it had always been a normal historical site. But the timestamp on Lily's message, it was dated 6 months in the future. I drove to Philadelphia, found the penitentiary exactly where it should be. Normal, touristy, safe. But after closing time, when the tour groups were gone and the staff had left, I saw the other entrance, the one that shouldn't exist, cut into the wall like an afterthought, fresh plywood. You know the drill by now. I didn't go in, but I could hear voices from inside. Familiar voices. Marcus, Lily, others I didn't recognize, all of them talking at once, overlapping, sharing stories about buildings that didn't exist and rules that couldn't be broken. And underneath it all, Reynolds' voice. Not just one Reynolds now, but many. A network of keepers, managing an ever-growing collection of impossible places. Every city has its ruins, they chanted in unison. Every ruin has its rules. Every rule is meant to be broken. Every broken rule feeds the network. I backed away, got in my car, drove straight home. But in my rearview mirror, I saw something that made my blood freeze. The penitentiary was following me, not physically, not literally. But every time I passed an abandoned building, it looked a little more like Eastern State. Every derelict house, every closed factory, every empty strip mall, they all had that same Gothic architecture. Those same imposing walls. The rules weren't just spreading to famous buildings anymore. They were spreading to everything. Every abandoned place becoming part of the network. Every empty building becoming a potential door. I'm documenting this because I think I'm next. My shadow has been acting strange for weeks now. Sometimes it moves before I do, like it knows where I'm going before I decide. And the buildings, God, the buildings are everywhere now, even my own house, when I'm not looking directly at it. I can see it in my peripheral vision. Abandoned, boarded up, with fresh plywood cut into a perfect rectangle over the front door. The network is complete, or nearly complete. Every city, every abandoned building. All connected now. All following the same 7 rules. with the same promise, the same threat. Break the rules, join the ruins. If you're still watching, if you made it this far, check your shadow. Right now. Is it doing exactly what you're doing, or is there a slight delay, a moment of hesitation? Because once you notice it, once you really see it, you can't unsee it. And that's when you'll understand. The Detroit Ruins rules aren't just about Detroit. They're everywhere. In every abandoned place you've ever been curious about, waiting for someone to break them. Comment below if your shadow is acting normal. But more importantly, bet on comment if it isn't. Because if it isn't, well, you might want to check what city you're actually in right now. The buildings have been moving a lot lately. Don't forget to subscribe if you're still you, and hit that notification bell if your shadow lets you, because next week, if there is a next week, I'm going to tell you about the final rule. The rule that's never written down. The rule that explains why some people come back, and others become the buildings themselves. Sweet dreams. And remember, rule number 6, always trust your shadow. Unless it's not yours anymore. Unless it's leading you somewhere you've already been. Unless it's leading you home to a place that doesn't exist yet. Story number 3. The CB radio crackled to life at exactly 4:44 a.m. Not 4:43. Not 4:45. Always 4:44. Anyone else seeing this? The voice was shaky, barely above a whisper. Mile marker 237. There's something wrong with mile marker 237. I've been driving trucks for 17 years, and I've heard every story there is. UFOs over Nevada, phantom hitchhikers in Tennessee, black dogs running alongside rigs in Arkansas. But what happens on I-80 at mile marker 237, that's different. That's real. And if you're listening to this right now, wrapped up in your blankets thinking this is just another spooky story to help you drift off to sleep, I need you to understand something. Sometimes the scariest things aren't the ones that jump out at you. Sometimes they're the ones that whisper. The ones that make you question what you saw, what you heard, what you know to be true. My name is Jake Morrison, and I've driven the Nebraska stretch of I-80 more times than I can count. But after what happened 3 weeks ago, I'm done. I turned in my keys, sold my rig, and now I'm telling you this story because someone needs to know. Someone needs to warn the others. But first, tell me something. Have you ever been driving late at night and felt like the road was watching you? Like the asphalt itself was alive? Leave a comment below if you have, because I need to know I'm not alone in this. Now, let me tell you what really happens when the clock strikes 4:44. 3 weeks ago, I was hauling a load of electronics from Oakland to Chicago. Standard run. I'd done it 100 times before. The Nebraska stretch of I-80 is long, flat, and, honestly, boring as hell during the day. But at night, it becomes something else entirely. The highway transforms after midnight. During the day, it's just another road, concrete and asphalt cutting through farmland, marked by the occasional grain elevator or water tower breaking the horizon. But when the sun goes down, when the last commuter has taken their exit, and the only lights are from the occasional truck or the distant glow of some small town, that's when the road starts to breathe. You feel it in the way your tires catch the pavement. The subtle vibrations that work their way up through the steering wheel and into your bones. During the day, it's just road noise. At night, it's a pulse, a rhythm, like the heartbeat of something vast and patient, lying just beneath the surface. I was making good time, probably doing 75 in a 70. The coffee was still warm in my thermos, and I had my favorite playlist going, classic rock. The good stuff. Boston was playing More Than a Feeling when I noticed my dashboard clock, 4:42 a.m. 2 minutes. I didn't know it then, but I had 2 minutes before everything changed. Looking back now, I can see the signs I missed. The way the radio station started to fade out, one by one, until only static remained. The way the mile markers seemed to be spaced wrong, too far apart or maybe too close together. Time felt elastic, stretched, like I was driving through honey instead of air. And the animals. I should have paid attention to the animals. Usually you'd see deer along this stretch. Rabbits, maybe a coyote if you were unlucky. But tonight, nothing. Not so much as a dead skunk on the shoulder. It was like every living thing with half a brain had decided to be somewhere else. The first thing you notice about mile marker 237 is that it doesn't belong there. I mean, physically, yes, it's there. The green sign, the white numbers. But if you check any map, any GPS, any official highway documentation, mile marker 237 shouldn't exist. The markers jump from 236 to 238, always have. Since they built this stretch of highway in 1959. But at 4:44 a.m., it appears. The radio started getting staticky. Not unusual out here in the middle of nowhere, but this was different. The static had a pattern to it, like breathing. In and out, in and out. Then I saw the lights. Not headlights, not taillights. These were different, soft, blue. Like those old TV screens when you'd wake up at 3 a.m. and the station had gone off the air. They were coming from the side of the road, about a quarter mile ahead. I eased off the accelerator. You learn to be careful out here. Could be an accident. Could be cops. Could be someone who needs help. But as I got closer, I saw it. Mile marker 237. The numbers seemed to glow in my headlights, but not in a reflective way. They glowed from within, like they were lit by something inside the sign itself. And standing next to it, Jesus Christ. Standing next to it was another truck, my truck. Same model, same color, same company logo on the side, same license plate. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the driver. He was standing beside the cab, facing the road, facing me. And even from 100 yards away, even in the darkness broken only by my headlights, I could see his face. It was my face, but wrong. The eyes were too wide, the smile was too big. And he was waving, slow, mechanical, like those animatronic figures at Chuck E. Cheese that terrified me as a kid. The other me, I don't know what else to call him, looked exactly like I did that night, down to the baseball cap and the flannel shirt I'd thrown on in the pre-dawn darkness. But there was something in his posture, something in the way he held himself, that was fundamentally wrong. He stood too straight, too still, like he was a photograph of a person rather than an actual person. And his eyes, God, his eyes never blinked. They stayed fixed on me as I approached, wide and unblinking, reflecting my headlights like an animal's, but not quite right. The reflection was blue instead of the usual gold or green, that same soft television static blue that had first caught my attention. I slammed on the brakes. My rig jackknifed slightly, tires screaming against the asphalt. The smell of burning rubber filled the cab. My coffee went everywhere. And when I looked up, nothing. No truck, no other me. No mile marker 237, just mile marker 238 coming up on my right like nothing had happened. I pulled over at the next rest stop, hands shaking so bad I could barely put the rig in park. I sat there for 20 minutes, trying to convince myself I'd micro-sleeped. You know what that is when you fall asleep for just a second or two while driving? Your brain fills in the gaps with dreams, hallucinations. That had to be it. But then I checked my dash cam. The footage was there. All of it, the truck, the other me, the sign. But here's the thing. The timestamp on the video, It showed 4:44 a.m. for exactly 1 mile. 1 entire mile of footage, all stamped 4:44 a.m. That's impossible. At the speed I was going, passing 1 mile should have taken less than a minute. But according to the footage, I was in that moment for I don't know how long I was there. I must have watched that footage 100 times over the next few hours, frame by frame, looking for some explanation, some glitch in the system, some rational reason why my camera had recorded something that couldn't exist. But the more I watched, the more details I noticed, things I'd missed in the terror of the moment. The other truck wasn't just identical to mine, it was mine. Same mud flaps, same crack in the windshield from a rock that had hit me outside Reno 2 months ago. Same faded company decal that I kept meaning to replace. And the other me, he wasn't just waving, he was mouthing something, words I couldn't make out in the footage, but the lip movements were clear, deliberate. Over and over, the same phrase. I tried to read his lips, but the angle was wrong, the lighting too poor. I called my dispatcher, told him I was taking a personal day. He wasn't happy, but something in my voice must have convinced him not to push it. I spent the rest of that morning at the rest stop, drinking coffee and trying to make sense of what I'd seen. That's when I met her. Her name was Darlene, 60-something, weathered face, eyes that had seen too much highway. She drove for Conway back in the day, before they got bought out. Now she was independent. Her rig was parked 2 spots over, and she must have noticed me sitting there staring at nothing because she knocked on my window. You saw it, didn't you? No hello, no introduction, just that question. I nodded. Couldn't find words. Mile marker 237, the 4:44 shift. Yeah, you got that look. Same look we all get the first time. The first time? My voice cracked like I was 16 again. She climbed up into my passenger seat without asking, pulled out a beaten-up notebook from her jacket pocket. Been documenting this for 12 years. Every trucker who's seen it, every story, every detail. The notebook was a revelation. Page after page of handwritten accounts, newspaper clippings, photocopied incident reports. Darlene had been thorough, obsessively so. She'd tracked down drivers across the country, followed up on stories, connected dots that the authorities either couldn't or wouldn't see. Started happening in 2008, she explained, lighting a cigarette despite the no-smoking policy. Right around the time of the economic crash. Lot of drivers lost their jobs. Lot of families broke up. Highway got lonelier. And that's when it started feeding. Feeding? You think roads are just concrete and asphalt? Think again. Roads are stories, Jake. Every mile has been traveled by thousands of people, all of them bringing their hopes, their fears, their dreams, their desperation. All of that gets absorbed, becomes part of the road itself. And some roads develop a hunger. The notebook was filled with entries, hundreds of them. Names, dates, descriptions, all variations of the same experience. Mile marker 237, 4:44 a.m. And always they see themselves. But that's not the weird part, Darlene said, flipping to a page near the back. The weird part is what happens to the ones who stop. Stop? When you see yourself, when you see that other truck, some drivers stop, they pull over, they get out, they walk up to that other version of themselves. She paused, studying my reaction, and they never drive again. What do you mean? I mean they disappear. Or, no, that's not right. They don't disappear. They're still around, still living their lives, but they never get back in a truck. They can't. Something about that moment, that interaction, it breaks something inside them. Their relationship with the road, with driving, with, she waved her hand vaguely, with whatever keeps us moving forward. She showed me a photograph, a police report, A driver named Marcus Chen, who'd been found walking along I-80, completely catatonic, his truck abandoned 2 miles back with the engine still running. He'd recovered eventually, physically anyway, but according to the follow-up reports, he'd never driven again. Couldn't even be a passenger in a car without having panic attacks. There's others, Darlene continued, pulling out more files. Rebecca Martinez, Tommy Sullivan, David Kim, all of them experienced drivers. All of them saw mile marker 237. All of them got out of their trucks to investigate. And all of them changed. She showed me news clippings, missing person reports that were later canceled. Drivers who just walked away from their rigs, left them running on the side of the road, keys in the ignition, coffee still warm. There's a pattern, she continued. It only happens to solo drivers, never teams, never during the day, always at 4:44 a.m. And here's the kicker. It only happens to drivers who are alone in more ways than one. What's that supposed to mean? She studied my face. When's the last time you called home, Jake? I wanted to lie, to tell her I'd just talked to Sarah that evening, that the kids were doing great, that everything was fine, but 3 months, I admitted. The divorce was finalized 3 months ago. She nodded, like she'd expected that answer. The road takes the lonely ones first, the ones who've got nothing but miles ahead and miles behind, the ones who've made the highway their home because they don't have one anywhere else. That's, I wanted to say crazy, wanted to laugh it off, but the footage was still on my dash cam. The timestamp still showed 4:44 for that entire impossible mile. There's more, Darlene said. The drivers who've seen it, we stay in touch. CB Channel 23. We call ourselves the 444 Club. Not because we want to be in it, but because once you've seen mile marker 237, you need to know you're not losing your mind. She gave me a frequency, a time to check in, and a warning. Don't go looking for it again. Some do. They think if they can face it, understand it, they can beat it. But Jake, the road doesn't give up its secrets. It takes them, one driver at a time. I should have listened to Darlene, should have taken a different route, should have done a lot of things differently. But there's something about being told not to look at something that makes it impossible to look away. 2 weeks passed. I took different runs, stayed away from that stretch of I-80. But every night at 4:44 a.m., no matter where I was, the radio would crackle. Voices would break through. Other drivers. Other members of the 444 Club. Saw it again tonight, mile marker 237. But this time there were 2 trucks. My other self, he was crying. Just standing there beside the road, crying. I stopped. God help me, I stopped. And when I looked in the cab of the other truck, there was nobody driving, but it was still moving. The stories got worse, more frequent. And I realized something. It was spreading, not geographically but temporally. Drivers were starting to see it at 4:43, then 4:45. The window was expanding. But it wasn't just the time that was changing. The stories themselves were evolving, becoming more complex, more personal. One driver reported seeing not just himself, but his entire family standing by the roadside. His ex-wife, his kids, all of them waving goodbye. Another swore he saw his truck loaded with coffins instead of cargo, each one bearing the name of someone he'd lost touch with over the years. The 444 Club became my lifeline and my curse. Every night, I'd tune into Channel 23, partly hoping to hear that it had stopped, that whatever was happening had burned itself out. But mostly, I'll admit, I listened because I was addicted to the stories. Each account was like a puzzle piece, and I was desperate to see the complete picture. That's when I started researching the history of that stretch of highway. What I found made everything worse. Interstate 80 through Nebraska was built on top of older roads, The Lincoln Highway, the Oregon Trail. Before that, Native American hunting paths. And before that, something else, something older. Darlene's notebook mentioned it briefly. Local legends about a place where time moved differently, where the dead walked, where travelers vanished without a trace. The Pawnee had a name for it, the Hungry Path. They avoided it, built their villages miles away, warned their children never to travel it alone. When the first European explorers came through, they reported strange phenomena. Compass needles spinning wildly, horses refusing to continue, men who wandered off the trail and were found days later with no memory of where they'd been. But the most disturbing thing I found was a geological survey from 1955, 4 years before they built this section of I-80. The survey noted what they called temporal anomalies, spots where radiocarbon dating gave impossible results, rocks that were somehow older than they should be, soil layers that were out of sequence, as if time itself had gotten twisted in this place. The surveyors recommended building the highway somewhere else. Their report was filed and forgotten. I had to know why, had to understand what was happening. So last week, I went back. I timed it perfectly. Hit mile marker 236 at exactly 4:43 a.m. Speed steady at 70. Dashboard cam running. Phone recording. Every piece of documentation I could think of. 4:43:30, nothing. 4:43:45, nothing. 4:43:55, the static started. But this time, I was ready for it. I'd brought a frequency analyzer, downloaded it on my phone. The static wasn't random, it was voices, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all talking at once, all saying the same thing. Turn around, turn around, turn around. 4:44 a.m., the mile marker appeared. But this time there weren't just one other truck. There were dozens, all identical to mine, all parked along that impossible stretch of road that shouldn't exist. And standing beside each one, versions of me, different ages, some younger, some older. Some were injured, bleeding. Some were smiling. Some were screaming silently, but they were all waving, that same slow, mechanical wave. I kept driving, had to, couldn't stop, wouldn't stop. But as I passed them, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Each version of me was holding something. A sign. A small white sign. And each one had a date written on it. The first one, March 15, 2008. The day I started driving trucks. The second, June 8, 2012. The day my father died. The third, September 22nd, 2018. The day Sarah left. Every major moment of my life, every turn, every decision that led me to be alone in this truck at 4:44 a.m. on this stretch of I-80, they were all there. All the possibilities, all the paths not taken, all the versions of me that could have been. And at the very end of the line, standing next to the last truck, was a version of me holding a sign with tomorrow's date. He wasn't waving, he was pointing at something behind me. I looked in my mirrors. There was another truck following me, matching my speed exactly, and in the driver's seat, it was me, the current me, the one driving right now, but his eyes were closed. He was asleep at the wheel. I jerked my attention back to the road ahead, heart hammering against my ribs. The speedometer read 0. I was stopped. But the scenery was still flying past the windows. The engine was still running. The mile markers were still counting up, 238, 239, 240. But I wasn't moving, or no, that's not right. I was moving, but not through space. Through. I slammed the accelerator, nothing changed. Hit the brakes, nothing. The truck was driving itself now, and on the radio, cutting through the static, a voice. my voice. But older. Tired, broken. You can't outrun yourself, Jake. Every mile you drive, you leave a piece of yourself on the road, and at 4:44, the road gives them all back. All at once. All the yous you've been. All the yous you could have been. All the yous you'll never be. What do you want? I screamed at the radio. We want you to choose. Stay on the road forever, driving through possibilities, never reaching a destination. Or stop, get out, face yourself, all of yourself, and see what remains. The mile markers were spinning now. Random numbers, impossible numbers, negative numbers, and then mile marker 237. I was back, the same spot, the same time, 4:44 a.m., but now I understood. This wasn't a haunting. It wasn't a ghost story. It was a choice. The same choice every lonely driver makes every single day. Keep going or stop. Keep running from yourself or turn around and face what you've become. I pulled over. The moment my truck stopped, everything went silent. No engine noise, no static, no voices, just the kind of quiet that makes you realize how loud your own heartbeat is. I sat there for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. My hand on the door handle, knowing that once I opened it, once I stepped out, there was no going back. But I had to know, had to understand, had to face whatever was waiting for me on that impossible stretch of road. The door opened with a pneumatic hiss. The cold Nebraska air hit me like a physical thing, sharp and real. More real than anything had felt in months. Years, maybe. They were all still there, all the versions of me. But now, up close, I could see the differences more clearly. The me from 2008 had hope in his eyes. The me from 2012 was broken but healing. The me from 2018 was angry, so angry. And the me with tomorrow's date, he was empty, hollow. Like someone had scooped out everything that made him human and left just the shell. That's what happens, he said. And his voice was like wind through dead leaves. When you drive long enough, when you measure your life in miles instead of moments, you become the road. Empty. Endless. Going nowhere. But I have somewhere to go, I protested. I have deliveries, schedules. I have... What? What do you have, Jake? I tried to answer, tried to list the things that mattered. But every time I opened my mouth, the words turned to dust, because the truth was, I didn't have anything. I'd given it all to the road, my marriage, my kids, my friends, my life. Mile by mile, I'd traded it all for the illusion of movement. The feeling that as long as I was driving, I was going somewhere, doing something, being someone. The road is hungry, another version of me said. This one was older, much older, impossibly older. It feeds on loneliness, on isolation, on the lies we tell ourselves about why we keep moving. And at 4:44, it shows us the truth, that we're not going anywhere. We're just running in place, wearing ourselves down to nothing. So what happens if I get back in the truck? I asked. You keep driving, forever, through every possibility, every could have been, every should have been, never stopping, never arriving, just driving. And if I don't? They all smiled, the same sad, knowing smile. Then you walk away. You leave the truck here. Leave this version of yourself here, and you go home. I don't have a home. Everyone has a home, Jake. You just forgot where yours is. I thought about Sarah, about the kids, about the life I'd driven away from, the calls I hadn't returned, the birthdays I'd missed, the anniversaries I'd forgotten. All sacrificed for what? Another mile, another load, another empty truck stop coffee at 3 a.m. Standing there on that impossible stretch of highway surrounded by all the versions of myself I'd been and could have been, I finally understood what Darlene had been trying to tell me. The road wasn't just hungry, it was patient. It didn't force you to give up your life. It convinced you to trade it away, piece by piece, mile by mile, until you had nothing left but the endless drive forward. I thought about my daughter Emma's last birthday party. I'd been stuck in traffic in Denver, 3 hours late for my delivery when Sarah called. Emma was crying because Daddy wasn't there to blow out the candles with her. I'd promised to make it up to her, but by the time I got home 2 weeks later, she'd already moved on to other things. The moment was gone forever, sacrificed to the altar of on-time delivery, and my son Michael's baseball games. How many had I missed? How many times had I told him I'd be at the next one, only to pick up a rush job that took me in the opposite direction? The disappointed look in his eyes when he'd scan the bleachers and not find me there. The way he'd stopped asking if I was coming after a while. But my job, there's always another driver, Jake. Always another lonely soul ready to trade their life for miles. The road will never run out of food. I looked back at my truck, my beautiful, terrible truck, my home for the last 17 years, my prison, my escape, my everything and my nothing. Inside the cab, I could see another me, sitting behind the wheel, waiting, ready to drive forever if I let him. The other me, the one who would keep driving, looked exactly like I did in this moment. Tired, worn down, but there was something in his expression that chilled me. Acceptance. Resignation. He'd already made his choice. He'd chosen the road, chosen the endless drive, chosen to disappear into the miles until there was nothing left of Jake Morrison except a name on a dispatch board and a truck that never stopped moving. But there was something else in his eyes. Relief. The terrible relief that comes from giving up. From finally surrendering the weight of choice, of responsibility, of having to decide what kind of person you want to be every single day. The road would take care of all that. The road would make the decisions. The road would define who he was, who I could become. Choose, all the versions of me said in unison. Choose now, because at 4:45, the choice gets made for you. I looked at my watch. 4:44:45. 15 seconds. I thought about Darlene, about the 444 Club, about all the drivers who'd seen this place. Some got back in their trucks, kept driving, became ghosts themselves, haunting the highways forever running from the truth. But some walked away. 10 seconds. Some found the courage to stop running. 5 seconds, to face themselves. 3, to choose life over miles. 2, to go home. 1, I turned away from the truck, started walking. Behind me, I heard the engine start, heard the air brakes release, heard 17 years of my life drive away into the darkness. But I didn't look back. I walked for 3 hours along I-80 before a state trooper picked me up. Told him my truck broke down and I'd already called for a tow. He didn't question it. Drove me to the nearest town, Grand Island. And from there, I went home. Sarah didn't take me back. Didn't expect her to. But she let me see the kids. Let me start rebuilding what I'd torn down. Mile by mile, I'm finding my way back. Not on the highway, but in the small moments, the birthday parties, the school plays, the bedtime stories. I work construction now, home every night. And sometimes when I'm lying in bed at 4:44 a.m., I think I can hear it. The static, the voices, the call of the road. But I don't answer, because I know the truth about mile marker 237. It's not a ghost story, it's a mirror, and it shows you exactly what you've become when you choose miles over moments, when you choose movement over meaning, when you choose the road over everything else. The 444 Club still meets on Channel 23. I listen sometimes, new voices, new stories, same old trap, and I want to warn them. Want to tell them to get out now before it's too late. But they wouldn't listen. I wouldn't have listened. Not until I saw myself, all of myself, and realized that I was disappearing 1 mile at a time. So, if you're out there driving through the night, watching the mile markers count up or down, living your life in increments of distance instead of time, remember this story. Remember mile marker 237. Remember that the road is hungry and it will take everything you're willing to give it. And at 4:44 a.m., it will show you exactly what's left. Now I need to know, have you ever driven past a mile marker that shouldn't exist? Have you ever felt time stop on an empty highway? Have you ever seen yourself driving the other direction? Leave a comment below. Share this story with someone who drives for a living. Someone who needs to hear it. Because mile marker 237 is still out there. Still hungry. Still waiting. And it's always 4:44 somewhere. Subscribe if you want to hear more true stories from the highways. Stories that truckers only tell each other. Stories that the road doesn't want you to know. Because this is just the beginning. There are other mile markers, other times, other choices waiting in the darkness. And sometimes the road chooses you. Sleep tight. Story number 4. Have you ever noticed how your smart home devices seem to know a little too much about you? Last month, I thought it was just convenient, until I realized my house had been learning my routines for something else entirely. What I discovered in my own home's data logs will make me question every piece of technology I trust. But here's the thing that still keeps me awake at night. I'm not sure I was the only one living in my house. If you've ever felt like someone was watching you in your own home, you need to hear this. Because what happened to me in my quiet suburban neighborhood in Columbus, Ohio, could happen to anyone. Comment below if you've ever had your smart devices do something unexpected. And make sure you subscribe, because I have a feeling this story is just the beginning of something much bigger. The story starts now. My name is Sarah, and 3 months ago, I thought I had the perfect setup. I just moved into this beautiful colonial house on Maple Street in Dublin, a suburb just outside Columbus. You know the type. White picket fence, 2-car garage, neighbors who wave but don't get too involved in your business. The previous owners had left behind what they called a smart home paradise. Alexa devices in every room, smart thermostats, automated lights, security cameras, even a fancy doorbell that could recognize faces. At first, it felt like living in the future. Alexa, dim the lights to 30%, I'd say while settling in with my evening tea. The house would respond instantly, creating that perfect cozy atmosphere. The thermostat learned I liked it warmer in the mornings and cooler at night. The security system would arm itself when I left for my job at the insurance office downtown. But here's where it gets interesting. And I want you to really think about this as I tell you. How well do you actually know the technology in your own home? The first thing I noticed was small. Tiny, really. I'd come home from work around 6:30 each evening, and without me saying anything, the house would already be adjusting. Lights would brighten just as I pulled into the driveway. The thermostat would kick on exactly 2 minutes before I walked through the front door. My Spotify playlist would start playing from the kitchen speaker the moment I set my purse down. Smart learning algorithms, I told myself. That's what the manual had said. The house was just adapting to my patterns. But then I started noticing the timing was too perfect. I mean, I'm not the most punctual person. Some days I'd stop at the grocery store. Other days I'd grab coffee with my colleague Jessica. My schedule varied by sometimes 30 or 40 minutes. Yet somehow, the house always seemed to know exactly when I was coming home. One Tuesday evening in late September, I decided to test it. Instead of my usual route down High Street, I took a detour through Riverside Drive, adding about 15 minutes to my commute. I sat in my car for an extra 10 minutes at the end of my street, just watching. And you know what happened? Nothing. The house stayed dark, no welcoming lights, no music. It was like it was waiting, actually waiting for me to follow my normal pattern. That night, as I lay in bed listening to the house settle, those little creaks and sighs that old houses make, I started wondering, what if the convenience I'd been enjoying wasn't just about learning my routines? What if it was about something else entirely? The next few weeks, I started paying closer attention. And let me tell you, once you start really observing your own life, you notice things that should have been obvious all along. My coffee maker would start brewing at exactly 6:47 a.m. every morning. Not 6:45, not 6:50, exactly 6:47. I'd never programmed it for that specific time, but somehow it had learned that I typically stumbled to the kitchen around 6:50, and fresh coffee would be waiting. The bathroom lights would turn on at 2:23 a.m. every single night. I'm a pretty sound sleeper, so I'd only noticed because one night I happened to be awake with insomnia, reading on my phone. The soft glow had startled me, and when I got up to investigate, the lights turned off the moment I reached the hallway. Motion sensors, I reasoned. Just really sensitive ones. But here's what made my skin crawl. I started keeping a sleep journal, tracking my middle-of-the-night bathroom trips. And here's the thing that still makes me question everything. I wasn't getting up at 2:23. According to my notes, my typical nighttime bathroom breaks happened around 1:15 or 3:30, depending on how much water I'd had before bed. So why were the lights turning on when no one was moving through the house? I decided to check the device logs. Most people don't realize this, but smart home systems keep incredibly detailed records of every activation, every command, every sensor trigger. I pulled up the app on my laptop one Saturday morning, expecting to find some simple explanation. What I found instead was unsettling. According to the logs, my house was active almost constantly. Motion detected in the living room at 3:42 a.m. Kitchen lights dimmed at 4:17 a.m. Alexa activated in the master bedroom at 5:33 a.m., though no voice command was recorded. But I live alone, and I'm a heavy sleeper who rarely gets up before my 6:30 alarm. I scrolled back through weeks of data, and the pattern was consistent. Every night between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m., my house was busy, like someone was moving through it, turning things on and off, adjusting settings. That's when I noticed something that made my hands shake as I scrolled through the data. The front door smart lock showed it had been disengaged 17 times in the past month, always between 2:15 and 2:30 a.m., always re-engaged by 5:45 a.m. I've never given anyone else the code. I've never left after midnight. And I sure as hell have never been sleepwalking. So who or what had been coming into my house every night for the past month? I want you to imagine what it feels like to realize you might not be alone in your own home. That safe space, that place where you're supposed to feel most secure, suddenly becomes the most terrifying place in the world. I couldn't sleep. Every little sound, the refrigerator humming, the heater clicking on, the house settling, it all felt threatening. I started staying up later, pretending to read but actually listening, waiting. And that's when I heard it. It was a Thursday night, around 2:20 a.m. I was in bed with my laptop, supposedly working on insurance claims, but really just staying alert. The house was quiet, that deep kind of silence you get in suburban neighborhoods after midnight. Then I heard footsteps. Not the settling sounds houses make, not pipes creaking or wood expanding. Actual footsteps. Soft, careful, but definitely human. Moving through my downstairs hallway. My heart started pounding so hard I was sure whoever was down there could hear it. I grabbed my phone, ready to call 911, but then I stopped. What was I going to say? That my smart house logs showed someone coming in every night, but I'd never actually seen anyone? That I heard footsteps but couldn't prove they weren't just house noises. Instead, I did something that still makes me question my own judgment. I opened the smart home app on my phone and started watching the real-time activity feed. And what I saw there, I still get chills thinking about it. Every sensor in my house was activating in sequence. Motion detected in the front hallway, then the living room, kitchen, dining room, like someone was doing a careful, methodical walkthrough of the entire first floor. But here's the part that nearly made me scream. The app showed me exactly where the motion was being detected, room by room, in real time. And I could track the movement pattern. Whoever was in my house wasn't just wandering randomly. They were checking things. Specific things. First, they went to the kitchen and opened what the sensors logged as the refrigerator door. Then to my home office, where the motion detector by my desk activated. Then to the living room, where they seemed to spend several minutes near my bookshelf. They knew my house. They knew exactly where everything was, moving through the rooms like they'd done this dozens of times before. And then the motion sensors went quiet, but the front door lock didn't register as being re-engaged, which meant whoever had been in my house was still in my house. I sat there in my bed, phone clutched in my hands, watching the app and listening to nothing but my own terrified breathing. Minutes passed, 5, 10, 15, and then my bedroom Alexa activated. "Good night, Sarah," it said in that familiar artificial voice. "Sleep tight." I had never programmed it to say that. I'd never heard it say my name before, not without me specifically asking it to. But the truly terrifying part? When I checked the app log the next morning, there was no record of that voice activation. No command logged. No trigger event recorded. As if it had never happened at all. The next morning, I did what any rational person would do. I called the police. Officer Martinez from the Dublin Police Department was patient and professional, but I could see the skepticism in his eyes as I explained about the smart home logs and the mysterious nighttime activities. He walked through the house with me, checking windows, doors, looking for any signs of forced entry. Nothing. No scratches on the locks, no damaged windows, no footprints in the flower beds outside. The house was secure. I'm telling you this story from my sister's house in Cincinnati, where I've been staying for the past 2 weeks. I haven't been back to the house on Maple Street. I'm not sure I ever will be. But here's what's keeping me awake at night. Yesterday, I got a notification on my phone from my smart home app. Someone had disarmed the security system. The timestamp showed 2:23 a.m., the same time my bathroom lights used to turn on. I called the Dublin Police Department. Officer Martinez drove by the house. Everything looked normal, he said. Dark, quiet, secure. But the app logs show activity every night since I've been gone. Motion sensors, door locks. Even the Alexa device is activating. As if someone, or something, is still there. Still following the patterns. Still waiting. And here's what terrifies me most. 3 days ago, my sister mentioned that her smart doorbell had been acting strangely. Activating at odd hours. Recording motion when no one was there. She lives 47 miles away from my house in Dublin. But somehow, I don't think distance matters to whatever was in my house. I think it followed me. Yesterday morning, I found a new composition notebook on my sister's kitchen counter. Same black and white speckled cover. Same careful handwriting. Sarah's sister Emma leaves for her teaching job at 7:30 a.m. Drinks green tea, not coffee. Has a cat named Whiskers. Emma doesn't know Sarah told someone about the notebook. Emma doesn't know I've been here longer than Sarah has. Time to find a new house, a new family to study. If you've made it this far, check your smart home logs tonight. Look for patterns you can't explain. And if you find something, anything, that doesn't make sense, please leave a comment below. Because I'm starting to think what happened to me isn't isolated. I think it's spreading. Subscribe if you want to know what I discover next. Because I'm going back to that house. I have to know what's behind that bedroom wall. But more importantly, I have to warn everyone else. What do you think is really happening here? Have you ever felt like you're not alone in your own home? Let me know in the comments. Please, I really need to know I'm not the only one.